When my daughter stood in the doorway that morning, suitcase already zipped, the ocean light spilling behind her like a halo, she said it so calmly I almost didn't understand. "We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house." Her voice didn't shake. Mine did. For a moment, the sound of the waves outside was the only thing that made sense. I could feel the salt air brushing against my cheek, that same soft wind that had carried her laughter as a child, the same wind that had once dried her tears when she scraped her knees on this very porch. And now, she was selling the porch itself. Selling the house. Selling me, in a way. I didn't answer her right away. I just stared, at her pressed blouse, her tight bun, the faint impatience in her eyes. She looked like someone else. Someone polished and proud. Someone who had forgotten where she came from. "Sold." I finally whispered, the word tasting foreign in my mouth. "You sold it?" "Yes, Mom," she said, her tone firm, businesslike. "It's better this way. You can't take care of it anymore. You'll move in with us for a while until we figure something out." The tea in my hand trembled, spilling a thin brown line across the tablecloth I had embroidered when she was a baby. I looked down at the stains, spreading slow like bruises. "This house," I began, but she cut me off. "Mom. Don't start, please. You know this place is falling apart. You can't live here alone, it's time." She said it like she was helping me, saving me even. But I knew that tone. It was the same tone she used when she was 12, explaining why she had to take her brother's candy. Because he wasn't eating it anyway. But now she was taking my home. Because, apparently, I wasn't living in it properly. I walked out to the back porch, the wood creaking under my feet like an old friend crying. The sea stretched endlessly before me, calm, silver, and ancient. I could almost hear my late husband's voice echoing in the surf, calling my name the way he used to. We had built this house with our own hands. Every plank, every nail, every window had a story. He used to say, "May, one day, when we're gone, this house will keep our love alive." But love, it seems, doesn't count for much when money's on the table. I turned back to her. "How could you do this without asking me?" She sighed. The kind of sigh that says I'm the adult here, and you're the burden. "Mom, please don't make this harder." I had to make decisions. You don't answer your phone half the time. You get confused about bills. You need help. Confused. I repeated, my voice breaking. I knew I forgot things sometimes. Where I'd put my glasses, or the name of that woman from church with the lilac perfume. But confused. No, I wasn't confused. I just trusted her. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "your father and I saved for years to buy this place. I told you, this house is paid off. It's yours someday, but not yet. Not while I'm alive." Her eyes flickered then, just for a second. Something like guilt, or maybe annoyance. "Mom, the market's high right now. You don't understand. This is what's best for everyone." Everyone. I wanted to ask who everyone was. Her husband, who'd been pushing me to sell ever since the kitchen faucet started leaking. The same man who called this place a maintenance nightmare when I overheard him on the phone. But I didn't ask. I just stood there, watching my daughter, my baby, turn into a stranger before my eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, listening to the waves like I always did when I couldn't find peace. The moon hung low over the water, pale and patient. It had watched over me for 72 years, through love and loss, storms and calm. I thought about the first night we moved into this house. My husband carried me across the threshold, even though I told him he'd hurt his back. We had nothing but mismatched furniture and a broken radio, but we were happy. We danced barefoot in the living room to static music, laughing like fools. And when our daughter was born, I used to sit on that same porch, rocking her in my arms, humming lullabies while the sea whispered secrets to her. I wanted her to grow up knowing peace, safety, love. Now, I wondered where that love had gone. The next morning, she came with papers. Thick white envelopes, neat and official looking. "You just need to sign these, Mom. The sale's already in process." She slid them across the table like it was nothing. I didn't touch them. "You already signed my name, didn't you?" I asked quietly. Her eyes darted away. There it was. The truth hiding in the silence. "You don't understand how these things work," she said, her voice low. I had to make it quick. The realtor needed a signature. I stood up. My chair scraped the floor, sharp as thunder. "That's forgery, Anna." Her lips tightened. "It's family business, Mom." "Stop being dramatic. A family business. That's what betrayal gets called when it's done by someone you raised." After she left, the house felt hollow. Even the air seemed to pull away from me. I walked from room to room, touching the walls, the old picture frames, the seashell wind chime by the window. In the hallway hung a photo of Anna when she was 6, holding her first seashell, smiling with all her teeth missing. I remembered how she used to run into the waves, fearless, laughing as her father chased after her. "Don't go too far, sweetheart," I used to call out. "The ocean's bigger than it looks." I wish I could have told her the same about life. That evening, my neighbor Mrs. Alvarez came by with a basket of fresh bread. She could tell something was wrong. The way older women can just know. "You look pale, May," she said softly. "Everything all right?" I forced a smile. "My daughter's moving me out. Says she's sold the place." Her eyes widened. "Without your say." I nodded. She placed her hand over mine. Her fingers were warm, strong. "Don't sign anything, Corita. Not until you talk to someone." I wanted to believe I still had a choice. That there was still a way to stop what was already rolling downhill. But as I watched the last light of sunset fade over the water, I knew something inside me had already shifted. Something had broken. Quietly, but completely. That night, I packed a small suitcase. Not because I planned to leave, but because I didn't want her touching my things when she came back. I placed inside it my husband's wedding band, my mother's rosary, and the seashell Anna had once given me. I whispered to the empty house. "She doesn't know what she's doing. She's lost. That's all." But part of me knew better. Part of me knew that greed wears the same face as love until you look too close. When the moving truck arrived the next morning, I didn't cry. Not yet. Anna supervised everything. The men lifting boxes, the furniture being wrapped in blankets. She moved like a manager at a company, not a daughter dismantling her mother's life. I stood by the window, holding my teacup with both hands. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't when I said, "You can take my furniture, Anna. You can take the things. But you can't take my peace." Not this time. She didn't answer. Just looked at me like I was a stubborn child refusing to cooperate. And as I watched my life being packed away into cardboard and tape, I thought, maybe this is what it means to lose someone who's still alive. That was the last morning I saw my beach house standing the way it used to. Sunlit, alive, breathing with memories. The next time I passed it, there was a for sale sign on the lawn and an unfamiliar car parked in the driveway. The wind still carried the smell of salt and jasmine. The sea still whispered my name. But it didn't sound like home anymore. That was the day my story began. Not the story of a mother losing her daughter, but of a woman finding herself again, after being silenced, underestimated, and betrayed by her own blood. Because what she didn't know was that I still had one thing she didn't count on. A secret her greed would never touch. And I was about to use it. You know, when I look back now, I can't quite remember when love turned into obligation. When the sound of my daughter's voice, once soft and sweet as honey, started carrying that sharp little edge, the one that made me feel small in my own home. But I suppose that's how life works. Pain doesn't announce itself all at once. It seeps in quiet, like water under a door. You don't notice until your feet are soaked. When my husband, Charles, died, I thought my world had ended. He was the kind of man people don't make anymore. Steady, honest. A man who could fix a leaky roof and a broken heart in the same afternoon. We met in 1969, in a diner on the corner of 8th and Laurel. I was 19, wiping down counters for $1.35 an hour. He came in for coffee every morning, ordered it black, and left a dime on the counter for a tip. One day, he brought me a seashell. Said he found it by the shore, and that it reminded him of my smile. That shell still sits on my nightstand. He built this beach house with his own hands. Spent 3 summers nailing boards and mixing concrete after long shifts at the shipyard. I remember his shoulders sunburned red, his laughter echoing through the salt air as he said, "One day, this will be our forever home." And it was. For 50 years. We raised our daughter, Anna, here, our only child after 3 miscarriages that nearly broke me. She was our miracle. My heart in tiny sneakers, running across the sand. I used to braid her hair every morning before school. She'd sit on the kitchen stool swinging her legs, chattering about dolphins and mermaids, and how she'd build the biggest sandcastle in the world. Charles would come in, kiss us both, and say, "The sea's in her blood, May." Just like her mama. I believed him. After Charles passed, the house grew too quiet. You don't realize how much sound love makes. The creak of his chair, the way he hummed while fixing the sink, the click of his boots by the door. When that all stopped, even the waves outside seemed too loud, like the ocean was mocking my loneliness. Anna came every weekend at first. She'd bring soup or groceries, sometimes fresh flowers. "Just checking on you, Mom," she'd say. I'd pour her tea in the blue porcelain set we bought in Charleston. The one she always said looked too fancy for soup. She'd sit at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone while I talked about the church bake sale or the new neighbors. Sometimes, she'd smile. But mostly, she looked distracted. Still, I was grateful for the company. Then the visits got shorter. "I'm busy with work." "Mom, Mark's got a new project. We're trying to refinance the house." She stopped staying overnight. Stopped calling unless she needed something signed or approved. And every time she left, I felt a little more like a guest in her life, instead of the woman who gave her one. The first real argument came over the car. She said, "Mom, you shouldn't be driving anymore. You could get hurt." I told her, "I've been driving longer than you've been alive, sweetheart." She frowned. "It's not safe. You forget things sometimes." That stung. Forgetting the grocery list isn't the same as losing my mind. She sighed and said, "You don't need to be defensive. I'm just trying to help." But help has a way of sounding like control when it's handed to you instead of offered. 2 weeks later, I found out she'd called the insurance company and suspended my policy, for my own good. I didn't even get angry. I just sat in the driveway, staring at the car I could no longer use, while the sea wind lifted the gray hair from my shoulders. That was the first time I whispered to myself, "Something's changing, May." Anna was always ambitious, even as a child. She liked things just so. Her crayons sorted by color, her dolls lined up perfectly on the shelf. When she was 8, she started charging neighborhood kids 50 cents to play in our yard. "I'm learning about business," she said proudly. Charles laughed. I remember him whispering, "You've got a little CEO on your hands." We thought it was adorable then. But ambition without empathy grows into something colder. When Anna went off to college, I cried for a week. She'd been offered a partial scholarship, and Charles sold his fishing boat to cover the rest. He said, "It's for her future, May. She'll make us proud." And she did, in her way. She graduated top of her class, got a job in finance, and married Mark. A man with sharp suits and sharper eyes. I didn't trust him from the start. At dinner one night, I caught him looking around the beach house, nodding approvingly. He said, "This is a great piece of property, Mrs. Donovan. Probably worth a small fortune now." I laughed it off then. But later, when I saw Anna's eyes linger on the same walls, I realized she was thinking the same thing. When Charles died, Mark handled the paperwork. I was grateful. I didn't know the first thing about estates or taxes. But looking back, I see how that was when I started letting go of too much. One small permission at a time, Mark started managing the household finances. Anna took my mail, so I wouldn't get overwhelmed. She said she'd streamline my accounts. Every sentence sounded like help but ended in control. I used to think power was taken by force. Now I know, it's often given away politely, with a smile. Then came the little things. My checkbook went missing. She said, "Mom, you probably misplaced it. You've been forgetful lately." A credit card statement arrived with charges I didn't recognize. "Oh, I must have used your account by mistake," she said. I found out she'd added her name to my utilities, for convenience. But each thing seemed small enough on its own. But together, they were building something. A web of dependency. One I couldn't see until I was caught in it. I started writing things down. I bought a small notebook from the dollar store, blue cover, spiral, bound. I called it my memory book. I wrote dates, phone calls, amounts, even feelings. March 2nd, Anna took bank statements home. April 11th, real estate agent called. Said my daughter asked for appraisal. May 5th, found legal papers with my forged signature. I kept that notebook in the bread box, under the wax paper. I told myself it was silly, but deep down, I knew I was building a map. One I might need someday to find my way back to myself. Sometimes at night, I'd walk down to the beach barefoot. The sand cold under my soles, the air sharp with salt. I'd look at the dark water and talk to Charles like he could still hear me. "Tell me what to do, love," I'd whisper. "She's slipping away, and I don't know how to reach her." But the sea never answers. It only listens. The last birthday I spent in the beach house, Anna came late. No card, no flowers. Just a wrapped box with a digital tablet inside. "You can use this to keep track of bills, Mom," she said. "And I've set up all your accounts on it. Passwords are saved, so you won't have to remember anything." I smiled and thanked her, even though something about that made my stomach turn. Later that night, I realized I didn't even know the password to my own bank anymore. The next day, I found an email from the realtor she'd been talking to. "Congratulations on the accepted offer," it read. I sat there for hours, staring at that word. Congratulations. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't agreed to anything. And yet, somehow, I was being congratulated for losing my home. When I confronted her, she didn't even look surprised. "Mom, it's done. The sale's going through. You'll thank me later." "Thank you," I said quietly. "For what?" "For taking responsibility. For doing what's best for you. You can't keep up this place anymore. It's too much. You need to be somewhere safe. Somewhere safe." I realized then that she wasn't talking about safety. She was talking about control. About putting me somewhere she could manage, like a file in a cabinet. I looked her in the eye and said, "This house is my life, Anna. Your father built it. Every corner of it is filled with him. You can't just erase that." She crossed her arms, voice cold. "Mom, it's just a house. Just a house." "No, sweetheart. It was never just a house. It was our laughter in the hallway, your first steps on the porch, your father's hands on these walls. But greed can't hear memory. It only listens to opportunity." After that, I stopped answering her calls. I needed space to think. To breathe. To remember who I was before I started apologizing for existing. I went through old photo albums. Charles smiling with his arm around me. Anna at her high school prom. The three of us at the county fair. We looked so happy, so whole. I touched each picture like a prayer, whispering, "Where did we go wrong?" Mrs. Alvarez, my neighbor, noticed something was wrong before anyone else. She's 80 now, with sharp eyes and a heart twice her size. One afternoon, she came over with a basket of sweet rolls and said, "Ma, I saw men walking around your yard. You moving?" I shook my head. "Not that I know of." She frowned. "You be careful, Querida. Some people think old women don't notice things." I smiled sadly. Sometimes old women notice too much. That night, I tucked my notebook under my pillow. For the first time, I felt fear, not of being alone, but of being erased. The next week, Anna arrived with folders, and that same tone she used when she thought she was being reasonable. "We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house." I didn't even fight her then. I just watched the sun dip behind her, felt the wind shift, and realized that the girl I raised was gone. Replaced by someone who saw me as an obstacle. Still, I couldn't hate her. You don't stop loving your child. You just start loving them through the pain. That night, I sat at the kitchen table until the stars disappeared. I took out Charles's old cigar box. Inside were the deed, the insurance papers, and a copy of the original loan. My name alone was on it. And as I looked at those papers, yellowed and fragile. Something in me hardened. She thought I was too soft, too old, too confused to fight. But she didn't know that inside this wrinkled body still lived the woman who helped her father build this house board by board. And that woman wasn't done yet. I didn't know how, or when, or what it would cost me. But I knew one thing for certainty. I would not let my life be signed away behind my back. The sea outside roared louder than usual that night, crashing against the rocks like applause. Maybe it was Charles, reminding me that I still had strength left. And as the first light of dawn touched the windows, I whispered to myself, she may have taken my trust, but she won't take my dignity. Because sometimes, even after the greatest betrayal, a mother's story isn't about what was lost, but about what she finally found in herself. And I was about to find everything. The morning Anna told me she had sold the house, I thought I had seen the worst. I was wrong. Because betrayal, it turns out, isn't a single event. It's a pattern, a slow drip, and once you see it for what it is, the whole dam bursts at once. She came back that day with papers. Thick, official-looking papers. Contracts, signatures, dates. All neat and exact, and my stomach turned when I realized they weren't mine. Not a single letter of my trembling handwriting. Every mark was precise, confident, controlled. Every line screamed authority I had never given her. "Mom, just sign these and it'll be official," she said, placing the folders before me with a smile so calm it might have belonged to someone else. I touched the top sheet. It was cold beneath my fingers. A thin line of ink looked like it had been printed by a typewriter, not written by the mother of a child I had carried for 9 months, nurtured, and raised with every ounce of my being. "Anna," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady, you didn't sign my name, did you?" Her eyes flickered for a fraction of a second. Something like guilt, maybe fear. Then it vanished behind that practiced mask of innocence and reason. "Mom, don't be dramatic. It's all legal. Everything's in order. I called the lawyer. He said there's no problem. You're just going to have to trust me." Trust. That word hit me harder than a fist. Trust is sacred. And here it was being spat at me across my kitchen table. I remember sitting back in my chair, trying to breathe, trying to think. My hands shook, and I gripped the edges of the table like it was the only thing holding me upright. "You forged my signature," I said quietly. She leaned back, calm as ever. "I wouldn't call it that, Mom. I call it taking initiative. You know how forgetful you've been lately, and this was for your own good. The market's high right now. It's the perfect time. For my own good." I had heard those words before. Every doctor's appointment she rearranged, every bill she took care of, every call she intercepted, all for my own good. I felt like a child again, being lectured for crying over spilled milk. Only now the stakes were my life's work. The home my husband and I had built from nothing. Over the next few days, she set to work controlling every corner of my life. "Mom, we're setting up your new bank account," she said. "Mom, you need to move your things out this week. Mom, we've already scheduled the movers. Don't worry about a thing." And I didn't. At first, I didn't fight. I watched, numbly, as men packed my furniture, wrapped my photographs, and loaded boxes into the truck like they were strangers' possessions. She supervised everything, clipboard in hand, and I realized, with a kind of frozen horror, that she was enjoying it. There was a smugness in the way she checked each box off the list, as though she had won something monumental. And in a sense, she had. But the deeper betrayal wasn't the furniture or the house. It was the history she was erasing with her hands. The laughter, the late nights with my husband, the birthday parties, the Christmas mornings, the waves on the porch that carried her childhood voice. All of it now classified as things, to be moved, sold, or discarded. One afternoon, I found an envelope from the realtor tucked under the edge of the counter. It was addressed to me. I opened it and froze. Inside was the signed contract, my signature, forged. Perfect. Clean. I sat down on the floor, clutching it to my chest, and I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about the house. This was about power. About control. About showing me, the woman who had raised her, that my consent didn't matter. I called my lawyer that night, a kind man named Henry who had helped Charles with the property decades before. His voice was calm but firm on the phone. "Ma, you need to act fast. There's a clear case of forgery here, and we can stop this. But we have to move carefully. Don't let her see that you're panicking." I thanked him, but the fear was already inside me, crawling like cold fingers around my spine. Anna noticed my concern, of course. "Mom? You're overreacting," she said, leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed. "I've only been helping. Don't let Henry scare you. You'll just make things harder." I looked at her then, really looked, and I saw the truth. The little girl I had loved, the one who once held my hand in the rain and whispered her secrets, was gone. Replaced by someone who understood manipulation as skill, who had learned to wield affection as a weapon. She smiled at me, a tight, measured smile. And I realized I had been invisible in my own home. The walls, the furniture, the memories. Nothing mattered to her except profit and control. In the following days, she tried to cover every trace of my resistance. "Mom, the movers will need access to the attic. Can you just stay downstairs? Mom, I packed your jewelry in a safe place. You'll get it tomorrow. Mom, just relax. Stop stressing over things that don't matter." But I did stress. I watched them carry away my life piece by piece. The oak dresser Charles had built, the rocking chair where I'd nursed Anna as a baby, the old painting of the lighthouse. Everything I touched, everything that smelled of home, was being boxed and labeled like it meant nothing. And in my heart, I knew that she was waiting for me to break, waiting for me to collapse into despair so she could move in and take everything without opposition. One night, I went down to the shore. I walked barefoot in the wet sand, the waves licking my toes. The wind tore through my hair, carrying the salt and the sorrow. I whispered to the sea, to Charles, to the stars above. Where did we go wrong? How did love turn into this? The waves roared back, indifferent. But I felt a strange sort of comfort. They reminded me that even when the tide takes everything, it leaves the shore. And maybe, if I held on to myself, there was still hope. The next day, the betrayal became undeniable. I opened my mailbox and found several more letters from the lawyer representing the buyer. They were formal, curt, and final. The house was officially sold. No contingencies, no delay. My daughter's forged signature had been accepted as genuine. I called her. "Anna, you did this. You forged my name. You sold our home. How could you?" Her voice was calm, almost bored. "Mom, I did what had to be done. You wouldn't move. You wouldn't let go. I had to make a decision. Don't be upset. Everything is better this way." Better. I could hear the word like a knife twisting in my chest. Better for whom? Certainly not for me. Certainly not for the woman who had built this house with her husband's hands and her own sweat, who had raised her only child with everything she had. She arrived at the house later that afternoon, standing on the porch with that same expression I had come to recognize: calm, controlled, victorious. "Mom, the movers are finished. I packed up your things. You can come stay with us now." I looked at her, at the car full of boxes, at the empty rooms, at the walls that had heard our laughter for decades. "Anna, I don't even know you anymore." Her smile didn't falter. "I'm still your daughter, Mom. You just need to understand that some things are bigger than feelings. The world doesn't wait for sentiment. It moves forward." And that's when it hit me. She wasn't sorry. She never had been. She wasn't going to apologize. And she certainly wasn't going to stop. I sat down on the porch, the boards creaking under my weight. I held my hands in my lap and tried to steady my breath. The salt air was heavy in my lungs, and I felt small, invisible, humiliated. But underneath all of that, a tiny ember of resolve flickered. I could not let this end like this. I would not let my life be signed away while I sat quietly and accepted it. The betrayal had been revealed, fully, in all its magnitude. The daughter I had trusted, loved, and nurtured had shown me her true colors. And now, it was my turn to act. That evening, I went through every folder, every receipt, every note I had kept in my hidden notebook. Dates, conversations, amounts, a map of the truth that could not be silenced. The stars came out as I sat there, the sky infinite above me, and I whispered to Charles as I always did. I don't know how yet, love. But I will find a way. Because betrayal may reveal the darkness in others, but it also illuminates the strength within. And that night, I realized she might have taken the house, the furniture, the life we built. But she had not taken me. And one day, she would learn that lesson. After the last moving truck disappeared down the street, taking with it everything I had built, I sat in the empty shell of my home for hours. The walls echoed, carrying only the whispers of memories, Charles' laughter, Anna's small feet running across the porch, the smell of birthday cake and Christmas pine. The absence was deafening. I couldn't even cry anymore. My tears had all run out. All that was left was a hollow ache and a gnawing sense of failure. How had I not seen it? How had I not stopped it? But even in that darkness, there was a spark. A tiny, stubborn ember that refused to be extinguished. I had always survived worse: illness, grief, loneliness. And I realized then that I was going to survive this too. I just didn't know how. That night, I wandered through my garden one last time, brushing my fingers over the roses that Charles had planted, the lavender that had always smelled like home. I remembered his voice. Even when the world takes everything, it can never take the heart of a woman who keeps on walking. I clung to that memory like a lifeline. And in the quiet of the moonlit garden, I made a promise to myself. I would not disappear quietly, I would fight. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with truth. The very next morning, I knew I needed help. I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone who could see what had been done, who could navigate the cold corridors of legality and manipulation that Anna had walked so confidently. I called Henry, the lawyer who had once helped Charles with property matters decades ago. His voice was calm but firm on the phone. "May," he said, "don't panic. This is serious, but it's not hopeless. We have evidence, and we can fight this. The key is to be methodical, document everything. Every phone call, every email, every transaction." Hearing his words was like hearing the first bell of a church tower after weeks in a storm. A lifeline. I spent the next few days gathering every scrap of evidence I had. The spiral notebook I had hidden under the bread box became my Bible. Each entry, meticulously written, was a small shield against the injustice that had been inflicted upon me. April 12th. Anna took phone call in office. Mentioned realtor again. Said something about papers being ready. May 3rd. Bank called. Account activity I didn't authorize. June 18th. She said, "We're going tomorrow." Sold the beach house. Reading those words gave me clarity. The pattern was undeniable. She had lied, manipulated, and forged my signature. She had acted in bad faith and had tried to make me invisible in my own life. And now, I knew it was time to reclaim what was mine. The next part of my awakening came in an unexpected form. I had gone to the local coffee shop to clear my head. The sea was visible in the distance, a reminder of both the life I had lost and the strength I still carried. There I met Mrs. Alvarez, my neighbor. She had always been observant, the kind of woman whose eyes missed nothing. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses and said quietly, "I've been watching. You're not as helpless as they think. And you don't have to be." Her words startled me. "I don't know what you mean," I said, brushing my hand over the sleeve of my cardigan. She leaned closer, voice soft but firm. "I mean Anna. That girl, she thinks she can erase you. But you can't be erased. You need help, legal help, yes. But also clarity. You need to see the whole picture." I nodded, realizing she was right. The whole picture. I had been so focused on the house, on the betrayal, that I had not yet stepped back and seen the strategy she had used. The manipulation, the isolation, the control. Seeing it now was both terrifying and empowering. Over the next week, I began to reconstruct my understanding of the situation. I made lists, timelines, and notes. I called the banks and requested copies of every transaction. I went through old emails and letters, comparing them with the documents Anna had produced. Every time I uncovered a new layer of deceit, I felt a mixture of anger, sorrow, and clarity. This was not my failure. This was someone else's betrayal, carefully executed. And that realization gave me a sense of power I hadn't felt in weeks. One evening, Henry came over to my temporary apartment with a stack of papers and a gentle smile. You've been meticulous," he said. "These documents, your notebook, everything, it's going to be invaluable. The court will see the pattern clearly. Anna can't hide behind good intentions when the evidence is this strong." His words warmed me, but more importantly, they reminded me of something I had forgotten: my own strength. The years of grief, love, labor, and loss had not made me weak. They had prepared me for this moment. The first step was confronting the emotional manipulation. Anna had conditioned me to doubt myself, to feel small, to accept her decisions as inevitable. I realized I could no longer allow that. I practiced speaking aloud in front of a mirror, rehearsing my voice, my words, my boundaries. "You cannot erase me. You cannot control me. This house, this life, my name matters. My voice matters." It felt strange at first. My throat burned, my hands shook. But with each repetition I could feel the chains of fear loosening. The second step was strategy. Henry helped me draft letters to the realtor, the banks, and even to Anna, outlining the fraud, the forgery, and my intent to take legal action. Every letter was calm, precise, and factual, a mirror reflecting her lies back at her without emotion. I will not be intimidated or silenced. The signature on these documents is not mine. I demand a full review and the return of my property. Legal action will follow if necessary. Writing those words felt like reclaiming my own heartbeat, but the most important part of my awakening came unexpectedly. I realized I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my dignity, my autonomy, my right to exist in the world as a woman who had lived fully and fiercely. I began to see Anna's actions, not as the betrayal of a child, but as the projection of her own fears and ambitions. She had learned that control equals security, that wealth equals power, and that love could be used as leverage. And while that didn't excuse her actions, understanding them gave me clarity. One evening, sitting by the window and watching the moon reflect on the water, I made a list. Not a list of what she had taken, but of what I still had: my mind, sharp and aware. My memory, precise and thorough. My courage, tested and strengthened by decades of life. My notebook, the map of truth she could not erase. And most importantly, I had hope. A quiet, steady hope that the universe had not abandoned me. Over the next days, I began making calls, organizing meetings, and gathering witnesses. Former neighbors, friends, even long-lost colleagues. Anyone who could speak to the truth of my character, Anna's ambition, and the pattern of deceit. Each conversation reminded me of the network of love and respect I had built over a lifetime. I wasn't alone. I had allies. I had people who remembered the woman I was before betrayal had tried to define me. One afternoon, Henry suggested a meeting with a mediator. A neutral party who could facilitate a settlement or, if necessary, prepare for court. "May?" he said. "You've done the hardest work already. You've gathered the truth. You've clarified your position, and you've strengthened your voice. Now we just need to let the law do its work." I nodded, feeling a calm settle over me. It wasn't relief. That would come later. But a recognition that the tide was turning. That evening, I sat by the window, pen in hand, and wrote a letter to Anna. Not angry, not pleading. Just clear. Just truth. "Anna, I know what you've done. I know the papers are forged. The property sold without my consent. You may have taken the house, but you have not taken my life, my dignity, or my spirit. I intend to reclaim what is rightfully mine. And I hope, one day, you will understand what you have lost. More than any house could ever represent." Folding the letter, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. It was a small act, but it was mine. A declaration. A first step toward reclaiming everything. That night, lying in bed, I felt the first real sense of empowerment I had experienced since Anna's betrayal. I had met the helper I needed. I had found clarity. And most importantly, I had begun to see myself again. The road ahead would not be easy. The conflict was far from over. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a quiet certainty. I would not be erased. I would not be silenced. And I would not lose myself to fear. I whispered to the stars above, as I always did. "Charles, I don't know exactly how this will end. But I will walk through it, step by step. And I will reclaim what is mine. Not with rage, but with truth. Because sometimes, even after the deepest betrayal, the turning point is not about victory over others. It's about reclaiming yourself. And that night, I realized I was ready. The morning of the hearing arrived gray and cold. The kind of day that made you feel the weight of every memory, every choice, every betrayal pressing down on your shoulders. I stood at the courthouse steps, my coat pulled tightly around me, clutching my bag like a lifeline. Inside it were the notebooks, the documents, the handwritten records I had kept for weeks. They were my proof, my armor, my truth. And I was ready to show them to the world. I thought of Charles, of his gentle voice, of the hands that had built our home and planted the garden I had walked through just days ago, long before Anna's betrayal. His words echoed in my mind, May, even when the world takes everything, it can never take the heart of a woman who keeps on walking. I had walked through loss, through pain, through quiet betrayals. I had walked while grieving, while being humiliated, while watching the home of my life stripped away. And now, I was walking into a room where truth and deceit would finally collide. Anna entered the courtroom before me. She moved with the kind of practiced poise that comes from years of self-assurance and ambition. Her tailored suit was immaculate, her hair perfect, her expression serene. She smiled at me, the smile of someone who believed herself untouchable. I remembered the child she had once been, the little girl who had tripped over her shoelaces, who had whispered secrets in the rain, who had clung to my hand in fear and joy alike. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned to manipulate, to control, and to use love as a weapon. But I had something she had never anticipated: the truth. The hearing began with Anna's lawyer speaking first. He was polished, smooth, a man who had been trained to sway opinions with the cadence of his words. "Your Honor," he said, "these documents have been processed according to standard legal procedures. Donovan's daughter acted in her mother's best interest, managing the property in a way that Mrs. Donovan, given her age and health, might not have been able to." I felt a pang of doubt, the kind that had haunted me for weeks. But Henry leaned over, his hand on mine, whispering, "Ma, remember what we've built. The evidence is irrefutable. Trust it. Speak your truth." I nodded. The room fell away. There was only my voice, the notebooks in my hand, the years of memory and care that had been hidden behind Anna's manipulations. Henry called me to the stand. My knees shook as I rose, my notebook clutched tightly, my heart pounding. Every eye in the room felt like a weight, but I forced myself to breathe slowly, steadily, grounding myself in what I knew to be true. "Please state your name for the record," the clerk said. "May Donovan," I said, voice steadier than I expected. I began slowly, recounting the events leading up to the sale. I spoke of the calls I never received, the letters intercepted, the subtle manipulations that had conditioned me to doubt myself. I recounted, line by line, date by date, everything I had observed and documented. On June 5th, my daughter informed me that my property had been sold. I did not authorize this sale. I never signed any documents permitting it. The signature on these papers is forged, and I have documentation, witnesses, and records to prove it. I could feel Anna's eyes on me. She tried to mask her reaction, but there was a flicker, a tension around her mouth and jaw that betrayed the calm she had so carefully constructed. Henry presented my notebook to the court. Page after page, the records of conversations, bank statements, and email correspondences showed a clear pattern of manipulation. Witnesses I had gathered, neighbors, colleagues, and friends who had observed Anna's behavior over the years, testified to her controlling nature, her interference in my daily life, and the repeated attempts to isolate me. The courtroom listened, rapt, as I described not only the financial deceit, but the emotional manipulation, the late-night phone calls I was discouraged from answering, the letters and bills redirected without my knowledge, the constant insistence that she knew better than I did. I was led to believe that these actions were for my own good. I said, voice trembling slightly but gaining strength. But it was not care. It was control. It was erasure. And I will not accept it any longer. Then came the evidence of the forged signature. Henry carefully displayed a side-by-side comparison of my actual handwriting and the documents Anna had submitted. Every stroke, every loop, every nuance betrayed the hand of someone else. The court-appointed handwriting expert, called to testify, explained the differences meticulously: the slant of the letters, the pressure of the pen, the spacing, all inconsistent with my handwriting. Anna's lawyer tried to argue technicalities, claiming that handwriting could be inconclusive. But the expert's demonstration was methodical, precise, and damning. The courtroom fell silent. For the first time, I sensed Anna's confidence crack. Anna finally spoke in her defense, her voice calm, controlled, but with a hint of desperation she could not hide. "Mom, I only did what I thought was necessary. The house was too much for you. I thought selling it would simplify things." I looked at her, really looked, and spoke slowly, deliberately. "Safety. You call selling my home without my consent safety. You call erasing my life safety. No, Anna. This was about control, about power, about your own ambition. And it ends here." Her eyes flicked down, a shadow crossing her practice mask, and for a moment I saw the little girl who had been lost somewhere beneath the years of ambition and manipulation. The judge spoke, steady and deliberate. After reviewing all the evidence, including sworn testimony, financial documents, and expert analysis, it is clear that the sale of the property was conducted without the informed consent of the owner. The documents submitted were fraudulent. Ownership of the property is hereby restored to Mrs. May Donovan. The court also orders that any financial gains from the sale be returned to Mrs. Donovan. Relief washed over me, overwhelming and profound. I felt my shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. Justice had been served, not with vengeance, but with truth. Henry smiled at me, pride and relief in his eyes. "May, you stayed composed. You presented the facts. You didn't let anger control you. This is your victory." Tears filled my eyes. Not tears of sorrow but of vindication, of having survived and reclaimed my life. After the courtroom emptied, I lingered in the sunlight, letting the warmth wash over me. The waves in the distance seemed to cheer me silently, their rhythm echoing the steady beat of my own heart. I thought of Charles, of my garden, of the porch where I had watched Anna grow. All of it was mine again. Not just the house, but the life and dignity it represented. Anna avoided my gaze as we left the courtroom. I could feel her awareness of her loss, of her miscalculation. She had believed control could define her, but she had not reckoned with the strength of truth. That evening, I walked along the shore, barefoot in the sand. I let the cool water lap at my feet, carrying away the remnants of despair. I thought of my journey, the weeks of manipulation, the sleepless nights, the quiet moments of reflection. I realized that victory was not only about reclaiming property. It was about reclaiming myself. I whispered to the sea, to Charles, to the stars above. "You may have tried to take everything, Anna, but you could not take me." The waves roared back, indifferent and eternal, but in their rhythm, I felt a deep resonance. Life moves forward. Truth endures. Strength is discovered in the moments when one refuses to be silenced. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild not only the house but my life. I spoke with neighbors, friends, and even former colleagues, sharing the lessons learned from betrayal and the power of standing firm in truth. Each conversation, each acknowledgement, reinforced the sense of dignity and autonomy I had reclaimed. I realized that justice had restored more than a house. It had restored my faith in my own voice, my ability to trust my instincts, and my understanding that betrayal, no matter how deep, could never define the worth of a woman who refused to be erased. Anna never apologized. She never acknowledged the depth of her actions. But that was no longer my concern. I had reclaimed my life, my home, and my peace of mind. I had faced the ultimate confrontation and emerged intact, empowered, and resolute. The night sky stretched above me as I sat on the porch, the stars reflecting on the water beyond. I whispered to the memory of Charles, to the winds, to the universe. The world may try to take from us, but it cannot take the truth of who we are. I am May Donovan. I am seen, I am heard, I am whole. And in that moment, I felt freedom. The kind of freedom that comes from standing in the light of truth, after walking through the shadows of betrayal. The first morning I woke in my restored home. The sun poured through the windows in soft golden streams, touching every corner, every familiar surface, every memory I had thought was lost. The air smelled faintly of salt from the ocean, and the lavender Charles had planted decades ago, still resilient, still fragrant. I breathed it in deeply, letting the scent fill my lungs and seep into the spaces where doubt and fear had once resided. It felt strange, almost surreal, to walk through the house again. Each step echoed softly, carrying with it memories of laughter, sorrow, and decades of life lived fully. The walls remembered me. The floorboards remembered me. And for the first time in months, I remembered myself, as I truly was, without the weight of betrayal pressing on my shoulders. I sat by the window, holding a cup of tea in my hands, and let the waves beyond the shore become a meditation. Their rhythm was steady, eternal, and unbothered by the chaos humans created. I realized that life, like the ocean, had its storms, but it always moved forward, and beauty always returned. For days, I allowed myself to simply be. I walked through the garden, tending to the roses, the lavender, and the small vegetable patch Charles had once tended. Each plant I nurtured felt like a reaffirmation of life, of continuity, of resilience. In tending to them, I tended to myself. Friends came to visit. Neighbors who had quietly observed the unfolding of betrayal and justice. Former colleagues who had witnessed my dedication and integrity. Even distant relatives who had known nothing of the legal struggle but offered warmth and companionship. Each presence reminded me that I had not been alone, and that community, even when subtle and quiet, held power. I remember Mrs. Alvarez coming over one morning, her arms laden with fresh bread and flowers. She smiled at me, her eyes reflecting pride and gentle wisdom. "Ma, you've always been stronger than you realize. This house, this life, it was never really at risk. You just needed to remember who you are." I laughed softly, feeling tears gather at the corners of my eyes. "I think I needed to be reminded," I said. Her laughter was like a balm, a gentle affirmation that the world could still be kind after betrayal, that warmth could exist alongside pain. The process of reclaiming my home had also taught me patience. I spent hours organizing the rooms, rearranging furniture, and restoring small details that had been displaced. Each object I touched carried memories. The rocking chair where I had sung lullabies, the side table Charles had carved by hand, the bookshelves filled with stories I had shared with Anna when she was small. Every touch, every movement, felt like an act of reclaiming not only physical space, but the intangible essence of my life. My memories, my love, my history. I also spent time reconnecting with my own sense of purpose. In the quiet afternoons, I took up writing letters to friends I had lost touch with over the years, sharing my story not in anger, but in reflection. I wrote about resilience, about love, about the quiet dignity that comes from standing firm in truth. I discovered, too, a sense of generosity I had forgotten. I began mentoring young women in the community, sharing not just the lessons of law and justice, but the deeper lessons of self-worth, awareness, and courage. Never let anyone convince you that your life, your voice, or your choices do not matter. I told one young neighbor who had faced her own challenges. Even when the world seems to conspire against you, you have the power to stand, to speak, and to reclaim what is yours. Their eyes shone with gratitude and determination, and in them, I saw my own younger self, curious, cautious, but ultimately unyielding. The house, now filled with the presence of my reclaimed life, became a sanctuary not just of memories but of new beginnings. I spent evenings on the porch, listening to the waves, feeling the wind across my face, and watching the stars emerge, one by one. I realized that freedom was not merely the absence of manipulation or betrayal. It was the presence of self-awareness, self-respect, and self-love. I would sit there for hours, letting the night stretch before me, reflecting on the journey from despair to empowerment. The betrayal I had endured no longer felt like a weight, but like a teacher, harsh, unrelenting, but truthful. It had shown me the depth of my resilience, the clarity of my judgment, and the strength that comes from knowing your own worth. Anna's presence had faded from my life. She did not apologize, nor did she attempt reconciliation. And I realized, in that quiet acceptance, that her actions could not diminish me. I had not lost anything that mattered: my voice, my memories, my dignity. And in that understanding I found peace. I thought of the first days after the betrayal, the numbness, the fear, the disbelief. And I felt a deep compassion for myself. I had survived, endured, and reclaimed my life. I honored that journey, knowing that the pain had been real, but that my response had been stronger. As the weeks passed, I began inviting small gatherings into the home, celebrating milestones and memories, reconnecting with those who mattered, and creating new traditions. The house was once again alive with laughter, with the scent of home, cooked meals, and with the warmth of shared stories. One evening, sitting by the fire with a friend, I spoke quietly, reflecting on the journey. "You know, it's strange," I said. "I thought losing the house meant losing everything, but what I lost was only an illusion. What I gained, clarity, strength, and the knowledge that I can survive anything, is far more precious." She nodded, smiling knowingly. "Sometimes, it takes losing the familiar to truly find yourself," she said, and she was right. The house, the furniture, the possessions, they had all been part of my life, yes. But the essence of who I am, my courage, my dignity, my capacity to love and endure, had never been at risk. I began documenting my experiences, not for revenge, but as a testament to the lessons learned. I wrote of betrayal, of manipulation, of loss. But I also wrote of awakening, empowerment, and restoration. My words became a bridge for others who might one day face similar trials. "The world may attempt to erase you," I wrote one evening, "the moonlight reflecting off the pages, but truth, dignity, and courage are indelible. Stand firm, speak clearly, and hold tight to the essence of who you are. That is the life no one can take from you." Each sentence was a meditation, each paragraph a reaffirmation of resilience, each chapter a reflection of the journey from despair to freedom. The garden, now blooming and vibrant, became a place of solace and reflection. I spent mornings among the roses, the lavender, and the vegetables, feeling the rhythm of growth, of life renewed. In the act of tending, I found a meditation, a reminder that life, like the plants, endures even after storms. I spoke to the stars often, as I had when Charles was alive, finding in their steady light a reflection of the constancy of truth. "The world may test us, Charles," I whispered one night, "but I am still here. I am still whole, and I am free." As time passed, I welcomed the quiet moments of introspection as much as the company of friends. I walked along the beach, felt the wind, and watched the sunset paint the horizon in colors that seemed impossibly vivid after the gray of betrayal. The waves carried away remnants of fear and doubt, leaving behind clarity and peace. I realized, profoundly, that freedom was not simply the restoration of material possessions. It was the reclaiming of self, the recognition of inner strength, and the conscious decision to embrace life fully, despite the wounds that had been inflicted. In my solitude and reflection, I also found forgiveness. Not for Anna, not for the betrayal, but for myself, for the moments I doubted my own instincts, for the moments I allowed fear to take hold. I forgave the younger version of myself for being naive, for trusting too deeply, for loving without reserve. And in that forgiveness, I found a quiet joy and liberation that had nothing to do with the courtroom or the house, and everything to do with the reclamation of my spirit. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I walked through the garden and paused to look at the house. It was the same house, yes, but somehow transformed, not just by the absence of betrayal, but by the presence of regained strength, dignity, and love. I whispered to the wind, to Charles, to the universe, "I have lived. I have suffered, I have endured. And now I am free. Free to love, free to give, free to be. This house, these memories, this life, they are mine. And I will never allow them to be taken from me again." And in that moment, I felt the fullness of freedom, the serenity of truth, and the enduring power of resilience. The house became more than a home. It became a symbol of what is possible when one refuses to be silenced, when one chooses clarity over fear, courage over despair, and truth over deception. Each day was a testament to endurance, a celebration of reclaimed dignity, and a quiet acknowledgement that life, though tested, continues, beautifully, endlessly, and with the promise of renewal. I had survived betrayal, humiliated by deceit, and yet I emerged stronger, wiser, and at peace. And in that peace, I found the greatest gift of all, the certainty that my life, my voice, and my spirit were indestructible. The mornings now are quiet in a way I've learned to cherish. There is no rush, no fear, no weight pressing against my chest as it once did. Just the gentle sunlight spilling across my floors, the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore, and the faint scent of roses and lavender from the garden. I sit here, sometimes for hours, simply breathing, simply existing, simply remembering that I am alive, that I have survived, that I am whole. It's strange how betrayal can reshape your sense of the world. For weeks, no, months, I believed that the life I had built could be taken from me without warning, without recourse, without justice. I believed that love could be a weapon in the hands of someone you trusted most. I thought that control and greed were stronger than loyalty and truth. And yet, here I am, sitting in the same home I once feared I had lost forever, feeling the profound, unshakable knowledge that nothing, no person, no action, can erase the essence of who I am. I reflect often on Anna, the daughter who betrayed me, the child I raised with so much hope and care. She is a complicated figure in my life, a mixture of love and hurt, of innocence lost and ambition gained. I try not to dwell on anger, though I admit it flickers now, and then like a candle in the wind. But I have learned that true peace is not born from punishing others. It is born from understanding, acceptance, and the quiet reclaiming of one's own power. I think of all the moments where I doubted myself, the nights spent staring at blank walls, wondering how a life could be unraveled so easily. The mornings when I would sift through my mailbox and find another layer of manipulation or deceit. The afternoons when I wandered the empty garden, mourning not just the house, but the loss of the daughter I thought I knew. And I forgive myself for each of those moments, because they were real, because I was human, and because the journey of awakening often begins in the shadow of doubt. I also reflect on the journey itself. It is strange to think that betrayal, so sharp and painful, could become a teacher. Yet, it was. It forced me to see clearly, to confront reality without flinching, to build a network of support I hadn't realized I needed, and to understand my own strength. I had been tested in ways that made me question every instinct, every judgment, every memory. And through it all, I learned that clarity is not the absence of fear, but the presence of courage in spite of it. I think about the courtroom, the judge, Henry the lawyer, and the witnesses who testified to the truth of my life. I think about the moment the ruling was read, the words that restored not only the house, but the dignity that had been threatened. And I realize that justice is often quiet, deliberate, and patient. It doesn't always arrive with fireworks or grandeur, but when it does, it is profound and life-changing. The house, my reclaimed sanctuary, has become more than a building. It is a living testament to resilience. Every room holds memory, laughter, tears, love, grief, and the quiet triumph of survival. I walk through it now with mindfulness, touching the surfaces, rearranging what was once displaced, filling the space with light and warmth once again. The garden, too, thrives, not just with plants, but with the knowledge that life persists even after storms. I tend to it daily, letting the act of care become a meditation on renewal and growth. I've come to understand that freedom is not only about possessions or property. Freedom is the reclamation of self. Freedom is waking up in the morning and knowing that you are the author of your own story, that no one can dictate your worth, that your choices, your voice, and your presence are inviolable. That is the truest measure of victory. I think often about forgiveness. Not for Anna. She may never seek or offer it. But for myself. I forgive the moments when I doubted my own instincts, when I allowed fear to cloud judgment, when I feared that my life could be taken away. I forgive the younger May, the May who had trusted too deeply, loved too fully, and hoped too much. And in that forgiveness, I find liberation. I find the lightness that comes from releasing the weight of resentment, from understanding that life's purpose is not punishment, but learning, not retribution, but growth. I also reflect on love. Not the naive love that can be exploited, but the enduring love that lives in resilience, memory, and care. I think of Charles, of his gentle presence, of the hands that built our home, of the laughter that filled every corner. I think of the friends and neighbors who stayed quietly supportive through weeks of struggle. I think of the younger women I now mentor, sharing lessons about boundaries, dignity, and self-worth. Love, I realize, is a seed that grows quietly, persists through storms, and flourishes when tended with intention. The moral, the truth I want to leave with the world, crystallized slowly in those quiet moments. Betrayal teaches, but it also frees. Pain sharpens awareness. Humiliation tests resilience. Loss teaches the value of what remains. And when you finally reclaim your life, your voice, your dignity, it is not just a personal victory. It is a demonstration of what human courage can endure. I have learned that no one can take from you what you carry in your spirit. No deception can erase the integrity you have nurtured. No greed can undermine the clarity of a life lived in awareness and self-respect. And that, I believe, is a lesson worth sharing. In the evenings, I often sit on the porch, watching the sun sink into the ocean. The colors spill across the sky, pinks, purples, golds. A reminder that beauty persists even after storms, that light returns even after darkness, that life continues even when it has been tested. I breathe in the salt air, feel the wind on my face, and allow myself to fully inhabit the moment. I feel peace, deep and steady, and the quiet satisfaction of a life reclaimed. I speak to the stars above, to Charles, to the universe, and even to Anna, though indirectly. The world may attempt to erase you, to manipulate you, to control you. But it cannot erase the truth of who you are. You cannot be diminished unless you allow it. Stand firm, speak clearly, and honor your life. The waves lap at the shore below, carrying my words outward, indifferent, eternal, yet somehow resonant. I am reminded that the universe witnesses all, that justice, like the tide, moves steadily, and that truth, once claimed, cannot be undone. I think of the lessons I wish to leave behind, not just for myself, but for anyone who listens. First, know your worth. Do not allow fear, guilt, or manipulation to define you. Second, trust your instincts. They are often wiser than the voices of those who would seek control. Third, cultivate patience. Justice and clarity may take time, but persistence and meticulous care will reveal truth. And finally, embrace resilience. Life will test you, sometimes cruelly, but the spirit that survives, that endures, that rises again, that is the spirit that truly matters. I have shared my story not to dwell on pain, but to illuminate the path through it. I have endured betrayal, humiliation, and the erasure of my voice. I have reclaimed what was mine, not only physically but spiritually, emotionally, and morally. And in doing so, I have discovered the power that comes from standing in truth, speaking with clarity, and living with dignity. The house is no longer merely a place of shelter. It is a sanctuary of reflection, a home for renewal, and a beacon of resilience. The garden flourishes, the walls hum with memory and laughter, and I, the woman who once felt erased, now feels fully present in every corner of this life I have fought to reclaim. I have learned to embrace solitude, to find strength in quiet reflection, and to allow myself the freedom of peace. I have learned that the storms of life are inevitable, but the calm that follows is earned. I have learned that the betrayal of others can reveal the strength within us, if we allow ourselves to see it, and so, I leave this story with a gentle truth: true love cannot be bought, and freedom is worth any price. Truth, once claimed, cannot be erased. Dignity, once reclaimed, becomes the foundation of all future triumphs. I have lived, I have suffered, I have endured, and I have reclaimed. And now, in the quiet of my porch, in the rhythm of the waves, in the fragrance of roses and lavender, I am free. Free to love, free to give, free to live fully, and free to continue walking through life with clarity, courage, and joy. And you? What would you have done in my place? How would you have faced betrayal, manipulation, and loss? I would love to hear your opinion in the comments. Your voice matters, your experiences matter, and your story is worth being heard. Because at the end of the day, we are all walking our own path, discovering our own strength, reclaiming our own truth, and learning, step by step, that life, though tested, is always worth living fully with dignity, love, and courage.